Hey everyone, hope you had a good week or so or whatever it was since the last time I did an update on these campaigns that I am running right now. This is this ongoing campaign log that I am doing for both my son's group and my friend's group, the young ones and the Grognards. We are playing, just very quickly, if you haven't watched any of these, we are playing our own rule set, a rule set that I and my friends created when we were in high school many years ago. It has changed and been altered, but it is mostly an OSR rule set. We are using that in a homebrew world that I have created called the Shattered Shores, which is an island-based campaign, and both parties are in the same world at the same time, actively trying to do different quests in the same world. And sometimes things that one party will do will affect what happens for the other party. That really hasn't happened yet. It might happen in the next few sessions or so, basically because certain dungeons will have been cleared out and what have you. But for right now, there has been no intersection at all. I'll talk about my son's group first because we played on Friday, and then I'll do another video for the Saturday night group as well. You'll notice no time will pass because I'm probably just going to record all of this at once, but you will notice that I'm going to be wearing the same Minneapolis Red Jackets sweatshirt and this purple bandana. Just in case you want to know, the Minneapolis Red Jackets, one of several NFL teams that were based out of Minnesota that are no longer exist. I still need to get my Duluth Eskimos jersey, but regardless to any of that, so my son's group, my son's friend Ike was finally able to make it. He's part of the group. He showed up, and we first had him roll up his character. He made a druid, and oh man, I can't remember what his character's name is offhand right now, but it doesn't really matter. If you remember from the last session, they had been called to go. The big church of the God King asked them to investigate some disturbances that are happening in a farming and ranching village called the Reach. And it is on like this classic, the village on the very edge of the patrolled areas of the Empire. Very classic setting if you know your OSR stuff. I mean, the keep on the Borderlands, obviously. But regardless, they had gone there, they had investigated, they had found an evil cult of these humans that were worshiping a god other than the God King, which of course is blasphemous, and they needed to be rooted out. After dealing with it, like in the last adventure, they dealt with a few of those problems and were able to track them down to a dungeon. And they had just entered the dungeon and had a few encounters and explorations or whatever. With the last session, they had defeated a group of cultists that were in a room that were they looked like they were on guard duty, and they decided they're going to investigate further. They discussed at the beginning of the session, we just had the druid just show up. I didn't have a big storyline excuse. It just sometimes I like having, I worry about the verisimilitude of a situation being broken. With my son's group, I wasn't worried so much about that because it's just easier just to say, poof, they're out of the void and they just show up. And it's a little, the gamification of it is lost a little bit, but just to get things up and running, it was much easier to do that. The druid showed up. He has a monkey animal companion that I do remember. His name is Goop. Just I don't know. I mean, it's kids. They come up with it. And as I said before in the last session, they have been naming all of their characters after teachers that they have in middle school right now. So it's like Watland is one name, Sadler is another, Fergalberg is the is which is a real name. I was like, that's not a name, and I looked up in the school directory, and yes, there is a teacher by the name of Fergalberg. But and Ike named his character after another teacher. I can't remember the name of it offhand right now, but I'll update it maybe in the next session or whatever. So regardless, they were there and they actually were considering leaving because the sorcerer was down to his last couple of spells, and he thought that they were probably going to have an issue with taking care of that. And they were worried that they weren't going to have the firepower to keep going. But with the druid showing up and with the help of Goop, which they managed to have Goop like inspect certain areas of the place for them, which was actually pretty useful. And really inspired play by the druid player. Ike has all. I remember when Ike first started playing D&D with us a year and a half ago. He was one of the kids. I mean, and they're all great kids. My son and his friends are just they're fantastic kids. And but Ike was really always zeroed in on the game and trying to make sure that like he achieved the things that he wanted to do. So I was really happy when I knew Ike was going to be able to join us. Regardless, when they inspected a few more passageways and they found a few empty rooms that looked like they hadn't been used in a long time. As the dungeon master, I know that the cultists that are in this area are from a much larger space further into the jungle, and this is a scouting party basically that headed out this way. So they themselves, the cultists, haven't fully explored this old ancient ruin that they found. But they started looking at, and they found this room that had a fountain. And if you remember correctly, if you've watched the previous ones, the world fell into discord and disarray due to the fact that basically all the old gods vanished, died, who knows what, and actually blood rained from the heavens and destroyed the world and all these cataclysms and what have you. And a lot of times, like the fresh water and the ocean water has a red consistency to it, and it is fatal to drink that blood water. So it is avoided as much as possible. It also mutates the animals and the creatures or whatever. This isn't a world with a lot of like orcs and trolls and whatever. I'm not doing that. I'm actually kind of trying as hard as I can to create either realistic animals and monstrous animals for them to fight, or humans to deal with. Anyway, so they entered this thing, and there was this large cistern, and they were like, "What's a cistern?" And I said, "Well, it's basically like a big fountain." And because they heard the splashing of water, and they wanted to see what was going on. And when they got close enough to it, they noticed that there was this altar, and then there was this large book that was on this pedestal, and that was facing. And they're like, "What?" And I remember I said it's a lectern, and there's this large book, and they're like, "What's a lectern?" And I said, "Well, think of it like a large stand, a large pedestal, or whatever. There's this book." Like I said, when your teacher talks to you and they have their book at an angle in front of them that they can flip through, and they're like, "Oh, okay, that's what a lectern is." But anyway, so we're learning grammar as we play. But in front of this large fountain that is flowing this blood water. And so they're all like, "Oh, and they wanted to and they went over to the water and they were messing with it. And the sorcerer was like, "Oh my gosh." And this is actually a funny moment. And my son said, he's like, "Oh, is it a magical tome?" And the McGuire, the kid who plays the sorcerer, he said, "What's a tome?" And Caleb, my son, said, "It's just a cool word for a magical book." And he's like, "Oh." And then he looked at me and he said, "Is it a magical tome?" I mean, and I started laughing, and the kids kind of looked at me like I had a piece of wood growing out of my forehead because they didn't realize why I was laughing. But I found it funny. But I was also really, really impressed with the way McGuire handled that, because he was sitting there and he said, and I said, "The book looks really, really old, but there's no like title or anything on it." And he was like, "Oh, geez." And then I said, "But you do notice that there are a couple of those ribbons that people use as like, and he's like, as bookmarks." And I was like, "Yeah." And so while everybody else was kind of like trying to poke, they didn't want to touch the water, but they were poking at it with their weapons. I said, it's like they were like, "Oh," and they were looking at it. And McGuire's like, I'm gonna open the book." And everybody was like, "No, don't touch it, don't touch it." And he's like, "I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna do it." Classic great moment, right? When one person's like, "I'm gonna do it." And so I said, "Well, what are you gonna do? You just gonna flip it open?" And he's like, "No, I'm gonna go to one of the pages where the ribbon was held." And so now, as the dungeon master, I know that there's something they have to do for them to get the book to do what they want it to do. And in case they know I have this YouTube channel, so I'm not going to say it out loud in case they're tracking this down. But so I said, "You turn it over and it's blank. The page is blank." And he's like, "Huh." And then McGuire said, and he's like, "I'm going to go to the other ribbon spot." And to that one, it's blank as well. There's something they have to do to be able to use this. And there is a really, really good treasure in that room, but they have to figure out how to get it. And and so they're like, "Huh." And then McGuire, he said, "You know what? I'm gonna take the book." And I said, "It looks really, really old. Like it looks very fragile." And he's like, "Okay, I'm going to carefully remove the book." And that's when Bryson, my son, who's very cautious as a player. I love when Bryson, he's very cautious. He's like, "Wait, wait, wait. Let's think about this." Bryson said, "I put my hand on top of the book so he can't move it." And then McGuire's like, "I'm gonna pick it up before you can do it." And so I had a contest of like dexterity. And basically because of the rolls, I ruled that the book started slipping out of McGuire's hands, and he had to make a dexterity saving throw to be able to hold on to it, which he rolled a 1 on, which is of course a catastrophic failure. So two things happened. I knew that there was basically an alarm. If the book is removed, something bad happens. So that was going to happen. But I also knew that I had to have something happen. So I said the book hits the ground and like the spine of the book breaks and the pages start scattering everywhere. And everybody's like, "No." And they're like, "What did you do?" And all this stuff. But then the rune, this like basically magical spell, this rune started glowing that was on the lectern, that when the book is removed, it starts to glow. And that summons the blood skeletons that start coming out of the fountain. And they started fighting them, but then they realized that these skeletons were kind of tough, and they all agreed, "Run away." And so they all just ran out of the room, which I give them so much credit for. There is like, and especially like, and if you watch the second of these, you're gonna see why people should run away more often. Hint: there's player deaths, like player character deaths in the Grognard session. But they all are like, basically everybody just ran. They ran as far as away, and again, like totally using the abilities they have, they ran into a room that they knew was secluded. They closed the door, and McGuire, who still had one spell left over, cast Hold Portal on the door. Like remembered he had that spell, closed it, cast Hold Portal, and so they knew they were safe that evening. And I thought that was, I mean, again, I gave experience points to everybody for figuring out doing what they wanted to do, trying to like even to Bryson, like say, "Don't do it, don't do it," that kind of thing. I gave them bonus. Everybody got bonus experience for it because they just did such a great job of like trying to think through the room and then having the presence of mind, knowing that they, because they had less spells and they had less power, that they were going to run into problems if they went in there. So they rested that evening. They got up and they went back out. Now I ruled that like basically because that spell went off, the cultists knew about it and they went back there. They put the book together as best as they could. I ruled that one of them could cast a mending spell. They did that. They put it back onto the thing. The skeletons go back into the fountain. But now they were certain that there was people inside their dungeon. They were going to be looking for them. So when they went in there, I basically put one cult person standing with their backs to them because they wanted to go back and get that book. They talked about how they were going to figure that out. which again, I just love that aspect. Yes, there was lots of times when things devolved into like, people were joking around and like, talking about stuff that wasn't D&D, and that's fine. I'm totally fine with that. But when it came down to it, they were all able to like, okay, let's focus for like the next 15 minutes. How are we going to get that book? And they were figuring out, okay, we're going to go in there and then we'll grab it and we'll run. And they had all these things that they were going to do because they really, really wanted that book. And so they went back in. They saw the one person there. The thief tried to sneak forward to do something. He failed his sneak roll, which then the person turned around, and then the four other people that were hiding in the shadows came out, and they had a brief but bloody battle. A few of them got hurt, but nobody desperately, and they managed to take all of them out. They got a little bit of treasure. They got some. The one person got an upgrade to their armor, which they took. And then they were like, okay, this is what we're going to do. And then they had asked if they could take a door they take a door off the hinges because this room did not have a door to it. And they said, is it possible for us to take a door off the hinge, put it in this room at the doorway, and then cast Hold Portal on it as we run out the door so the skeletons can't get us? And you know what? I love ideas like that. Normally I would be like, that's ridiculous. But you know what? I thought it was a good idea, and I thought it was a good plan. And some person actually had like they had purchased like a hammer and like tools. Because they said, "Can I get a toolbox?" Like I said, "You can get a toolbox. It'll be big and heavy." But I said, "You get a little satchel of tools." And he's like, "Yeah, I want like a tools to use." And I was like, that's pretty smart, whatever. And so and the reason they did it is because we used the old secondary skill roll for AD&D, like what they did, and they got Tinker as their secondary skill. And I was like, well, if I'm a tinker, I should have like tools. And I said, yeah, that makes sense. So I rolled that they were able to take down a door. They hauled it over to this room, and then they had one person basically balance it and hold it up and like wait. They grab the book, skeletons show up, they run out of the room, they put the door back up, they cast Hold Portal on it, and I rolled it worked. And I thought that was pretty ingenious too. I mean, I do like when people like and like that's something that like my Grognard group would never think to do that. They're so regimented in their thinking. It's rare that they come up with those. And sadly, when we do come up with stuff like that, there are lots of times when the person running the game will say, that's ridiculous, you can't, that won't work. And that's unfortunate. But maybe that's another video to talk about at another time. Regardless to any of that. So they ran out and they then had the book. And so they were trying to study it and figure it out. And the people that didn't have magical abilities, the characters like that, they were like, can we just move on? Can we just figure out the book later? I want to like, because now people are going to know we're here. They're going to be upset with us. And so they went into, they traveled down a passageway. The last passageway they had, they found a room and they opened it up. And it basically was like the first mini boss of the dungeon, to use the parlance of our times, if you will. And the thing that made them really excited was they said there was a big giant like burly dude that was wearing hide armor, but he had this huge battle axe that he was using in combat, and it was made out of metal. Now, if you remember it's very Dark Sun-esque. There's not a lot of metal around in the world, so metal weapons are really, really valuable. And this was because basically everybody else in the party had gotten something cool, but the fighter hadn't got anything cool yet. And as soon as he saw that this guy had a metal weapon, he was like, "I need that axe." And they had, and this was normally when you have a one mob fight versus everybody else, it's over pretty quickly. But I purposely made this person pretty powerful, and so it took a couple of people got knocked unconscious in the combat, and even Goop got knocked unconscious, which everybody was like really mad when he hit the monkey, because the monkey was like throwing rocks at him. And I was like, well, if he hits it, maybe it can do a point of damage kind of thing. So they gave Goop like rocks to throw, and then he actually like used an attack on Goop and like actually nearly killed him, and that like really made they were angry that they attacked the monkey, and but they eventually took him down, and they got a pretty good amount of treasure. They got the metal axe, which the fighter was very excited about. and they found a door behind that the um, the mini boss or whatever. He had a necklace that had two keys on it, and one of the keys opened up that door, and now they have a second key. They know somewhere they have to find a second door somewhere. And that's how that session ended. I mean, we played for about 4 hours. With that little break in the middle to like run around outside and goof around for a little bit, throw football around for a little while. But for the most part, yeah, I mean, it's like we had a really, really good session. Nobody's made a level yet, but they're pretty excited about inspecting the rest of the dungeon, and they're excited to go through the rest of it and find that. And yeah, I mean, it's really fun for me to run a game for these kids because it makes me, and I'll say this probably every single time I do this, but it makes me remember playing D&D when I was their age, which, as I'm getting older, I'm definitely having that backwards years nostalgia feeling. And I remember being that young and being just so excited to be able to, play D&D with my friends and just come up with anything and everything that I could possibly think of. So there we go. That is the next session of Shattered Shores for the young ones. I invite you to go ahead and check out the Grognards video as well, so you can check and see how those fellas are doing in that world, if you will. But thank you very much for taking the time to watch this. I know there are many of you, but I really, really appreciate it. If you could, do the whole like, subscribe, comment thing. I'm not really trying to make my channel to be like this big giant revenue stream or anything like that, but I will fully admit that when I see new people show up and watch what I do and take part in it means the world to me, and it gives me a little happiness, if you will, a little that dopamine hit, whatever that we all so crave every single day. But take care of yourself, be awesome, and we'll talk soon.